I grew up in Newton, Iowa, a small community. Get on your bike and go right away from home. Come home at the end of the day on a summer day for dinner. But between, breakfast and dinner, you could be out and about, and it was a safe place to grow up. Then I graduated from that, went to Iowa State University, where I got a degree in computer science and ROTC. And it was that actually got me into the Air Force, was being in ROTC. That helped pay for my college education. And I took my computer science degree and then worked in the Air Force, starting out that way, writing software. It was called NORAD Cheyenne Mountain Complex. That's the place that watches for attacks on the U.S. and North America by ballistic missiles. So I wrote software that would simulate those sensors to be able to test and train those crews on that.
Now, let's talk about when you first joined the Air Force. They asked you three questions. Tell us what those three questions are.
Well, the three questions were primarily more on your security clearance form. It was, are you a communist? Yes or no? Are you a member of an organization that would advocate the overthrow of the U.S. government or the Constitution? Yes or no? And are you homosexual? Yes or no? And that comes out of what's called the Lavender Scare, if you're familiar with that. Back in the Eisenhower administration, that'd be the McCarthyism era, looking for communists and homosexuals, especially the homosexuals that could be compromised because it was illegal and immoral to be homosexual. Therefore, you could be blackmailed. There we go, blackmailed into divulging information and secrets because you couldn't be a homosexual. Therefore, if you were and somebody knew, then you'd be a threat. So those questions would come up periodically in that security clearance review. So for me, the word homosexual is almost a trigger word. You can call me just about anything else, just not a homosexual, because it takes me back to that. Even though when I answered those questions, I always said no, because I never identified with myself in my head that I was. I just knew what I thought, but I thought that was just normal. I didn't think I was gay or a homosexual. If I didn't, that wasn't, no, I couldn't be. So therefore I was not. And I did not think I was doing anything wrong or inappropriate. I just knew what I was thinking. Now, when I look back in time, I feel bad for maybe not addressing it. So maybe retroactive shame in my action, but not really that much of it, to be honest, because I answered truthfully. I wasn't lying. It was more just kind of pushing away. I used to tell people, I put on a mask, or I created a mask over time that was, 3 feet thick that just hid who I really was. I would rather be the person standing behind the plant in the corner at a gathering or a party instead of with people. I'm not that way anymore because all those things about the mask was a defensive thing. So you couldn't know who I was. Didn't know at the time, but this is what I now believe through lots of therapy, lots of coaching, lots of personal analysis, and a lot of kind of peer coaching with other people through their struggles and realizations.
Now, I think also when you are in a situation, the generation you're raised in, and understanding that gay was not as accepted as well. It's accepted more today than it was back then. So a lot of times we put on a mask, we go into hiding. When was the first time that you felt you had same-sex attraction? Was there a time or an event that happened where you realized that you had an interest in men?
I knew there was something there, but I thought it was somewhat normal. But now I know that was just deep denial of who I was. I was just ignoring that fact. In retrospect, again, this all works from now, looking backwards.
Of course, yeah.
Where my mind was and what I was really thinking and just denying and trying not to be that, because I was brought up to, it was illegal, immoral, not appropriate. Anyone you ever heard talked about as being a homosexual was always in a negative.
So tell us a little bit about your family life and when you came out to your wife as being gay.
Well, I was introduced to her. I was in my 30s, fell in love. We had a nice, courtship. Had enjoyed it. I was in love. She was in love. It was a beautiful wedding, beautiful life. I was military. We moved around a lot. She was very supportive. She gave up her career essentially because she stopped working. She had worked her way up very high into her profession. What she did was very known for her skills and abilities, but she gave all that up to marry this military guy. And then started moving around, realized it's kind of hard for her to have a career and me a career moving. And then we wanted a family and had 2 children. very close together, about 22 months. They were born, and she was always the one there while I was busy deploying or working my job, making sure that they were settled in the next school and the next community and their activities. We were a good couple. Don't Ask, Don't Tell didn't officially end until after I was retired by a couple months. But the precursor, all that, it was already softening up. I remember an Army Brigadier General that I used to work with, and he and his husband were often highlighted on the stage during June, during Pride Month, in the Pentagon courtyard. So it was
wow.
and accepted to do that, even though Don't Ask, Don't Tell wasn't officially all shut down. Most
Right.
of it had been, taken apart. It was okay. And it's now fun to look back at officers that served with me are now openly gay with their partners, where they were not before. They were just a single officer moving around, when in reality, they were actually in a partnership and just couldn't talk about it.
No, I was thinking, so there were others that were in a similar situation that were gay, but because of being in the military at that time, they couldn't come out as their authentic self. Would that be a true statement?
Oh, true statement. I can think of, I won't say them by name, but officers that served with me, and never saw them with a date or anything like that, and just didn't ask the question. In fact, one of those things in the subliminal thing in my mind, one of the things I feared is, as a unit commander, if someone was accused of being a homosexual at certain points of my career, based on policy, my job would be to, ensure that was explored and investigated. Never happened, so I didn't have to worry about that in real time, but that was always a lingering thing. But yeah, I know of officers that served with me in units where I was the commander or responsible. And at the time I had no indications, but later on, now they're on Facebook with their husband and their adopted son, as an example. Which is beautiful family, doing what we should all be able to do, loving each other and having a family, and providing all of the values of being a human being on the planet.
So tell about the time you came out to your wife and your kids. Tell us how that occurred.
I was now working at a university, actually. And then after that, I transferred and worked for a small consulting company. So I was no longer with a security clearance, wasn't asked those questions. My mind continued to percolate about all those things. I was on a business trip at a conference in Florida, and it was a boring conference. I could have given all the presentations, so it wasn't very intellectually stimulating. And I had all these books that I had downloaded on my Kindle. A lot of those books now are listed on the outlatewithdavid.com website of things I read and reviewed, and podcasts I listened to, Graying Rainbows, Dr. Jeremy Campbell, The Coming Out Lounge, now called Life Uncloseted by Rick Clemens. Listened to all those things, consumed it, and said, I think there's something here. So at that conference, I thought, I'm gay. I mean, let's face it, David. So I remember looking in the mirror in that Hampton Inn. I can still see that bathroom in the mirror and say, David, you're a gay man. It was like terror and relief at the same time, because I had been very depressed beforehand, withdrawn from life. I would drive 40 minutes to work and cry while driving my car to work, and then get myself put back together before I went in to work with my clients, because I was a consultant with lots of clients at different places I had to drive to or do them over Zoom. And then do the same thing going home, cry on the way home, and work through all that in my head. And so in that February at that conference, I came out to myself. And then after that, in March, I came out to a friend who'd come out 20 years earlier, only to have him tell me, say, David, I always thought you were gay. It's just taking you a while. Like, oh, thanks. Would have been nice maybe to give me a heads up. And then finally came out to her in April after seeing the Rachel Maddow, Pete Buttigieg interview, where Mayor Pete at the time was talking about when he came back from his deployment, he had to be his authentic self, because Rachel said, I don't know how you can live that way. That would just crush me. And I'm thinking, I think I'm in the crushed state.
Yeah.
I've got to tell her, even though it's going to drop 600 tons of bricks on her.
Now we're going to talk about how you came out to your wife. Now that you began to realize your authentic self, how did you tell your wife?
Well, after seeing that Pete Buttigieg interview, it was before going to bed 2 days later. I was going to bed earlier because I was getting up early to work out, and she came in and I told her, which was not the good way to do that. I just kind of dropped it on her. I didn't think through what's she going to do? Who's she going to go talk to? Is there a safe space for her? What's the safe space for me? I wasn't seeing a therapist. Didn't have a coach. I didn't have a counselor. I didn't have a confidant other than my friend I had called, and I hadn't thought through it and plotted it out in my mind of all of the different pieces and parts I needed to consider. So I really make that point to guys I work with now is think through all of that environment of you're giving this information to someone who is going to be more than likely surprised and like, oh my goodness, what next? And have 1,000 questions, or just be no questions at all and just walk away stunned. And so think of that too, and then how you would work through that to know what's next. Because you can't just pull somebody into the closet with you. You've got to give them permission to now. They got to talk to somebody with this information that you've just released.
And they're in shock and they're in pain.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes they're almost speechless at times. It's like, what did my husband just tell me? Because I think in your case, she had no indications, did she, that you had same-sex attraction?
No indication, and I had never done anything with it either. I'd honored the marriage vows. I had never cheated, hadn't stepped out. It was just the way I felt. And so some people say, how can you know you're gay if you've never tried it? Well, I just knew. I just knew it was a feeling. It's hard to explain, but I just knew. It's like when I ask people, how do you know you're a heterosexual? They just know.
Right. That's right. A person who is African American know they're black, and a white person knows they're white. They just know because they know and they see the difference in the color. So I understand that too. So talk about coming out to your children, how you were able to do that and what their response was.
Well, by then I had a fabulous therapist. The man's incredible. Ian Nelson Johnson. If anyone is in Madison, Wisconsin, look up Dr. Ian Nelson Johnson. He's incredible. He helped me come up with the way that I might do that. And I wrote a script, basically, explaining to them that I love them and I love their mother, but I've had this realization and understanding about myself. And while it's likely to have some change, it will never change that their mom and I are their parents. And we want the best for them. We'll be for them at all times and support them through their life as they continue. And I just explained there's just that, again, that I had honored the marriage as well. So they knew that because honor and integrity was important in our family values.
Yes.
And they just kind of sat there stunned. And I had it written out. I didn't read from it, but I used it as kind of like notes and then offered a copy if they wanted it afterwards.
And your daughter was the one that shed the tears. Now your son is the one that gave you a hug. And I think, tell us what is really, I think, powerful about your son.
He wanted to know how I knew I was gay. And I explained it to him. And he said, me too, at least queer. That's about all he said. And he was just, being vulnerable and open with me. So I can only think that my openness and vulnerability maybe gave him permission at some level or comfort.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And then there was another extended family member that came out later too. So it wasn't just me and him. And then I came out to my mother months later. She's very accepting. At some point in my life, she's had more LGBTQ plus friends than I have, which was interesting before I came out. In her church, especially, very open and affirming church. Her concern was what environment had she and my late father not provided to allow me to feel welcome and safe to be myself. And I said, no, you didn't do anything wrong. You were fantastic parents, setting a role model all the time. It was not you at all. And just the overall world environment I was in. And, it's not your fault at all.
Did your dad pass away before you told him?
He did. He 7 years before I came out.
It's hard to know what his response would be. Do you think he would have been accepting?
Oh, yeah, most definitely. I can remember stories as a kid. He was open to all people in our small, primarily white town, Iowa. When the first black family came to town, I hate to say this because it puts shame on the town, but it's reality. That family was greeted with not a lot of welcoming things like burning crosses in their front yard and sugar in the gas tank. And he, with some other friends, went over to help that family.
How about your brothers and sisters? Do they accept you as
very
gay?
much so, yes.
They do. I know the relationship with your ex-wife is not where you'd like it to be.
I like to do, but but she's probably, over, I got to give her space.
Of course. And they have their pain.
Mhm.
I mean, this was someone that loved you deeply and dearly. Now, David, I want to talk about this incredible website you have, outlatewithdavid.com. Why did you want to give this to people that came out late in the community?
Well, soon after I came out, remember I listened to Dr. Ginger Campbell on Graying Rainbows was her podcast, and she's now stopped that podcast. And there were just fabulous stories. And I was guest number 50 and told my story on that. And as part of that, in the show notes, she'll say, what do you have, resources you want to share with people or how people can get in contact with you, things like that. And I created a website, davidcotton.me. And it had a list of these resources. Again, all those books I had on my Kindle, the websites I'd read, the podcasts I listened to, the YouTube videos, the TED Talks, the doctoral theses on sexuality, all types of things I'd consumed. I thought, I need to share this with other people because I know what I was looking for. I couldn't find that. I couldn't find it curated. Yeah, Rick Clemens had some stuff and Ginger had her guests, but nobody had put together something where I could click and read, or click and buy to do that. So I did that website. Plus, during COVID, I spent 24 weeks, again, we're all at home on Zoom. And the Mankind Project had some groups for LGBTQ plus men where there was group coaching, where there'd be 10 men and 2 coaches. We're all gay, bi, or trans in this group. And we would get coached in that group environment and you hear other stories and other people. And I got inspired by coaching. So when my professional career pivoted, when I realized I really don't like IT, it's the people I like.
Yeah.
I decided to go into life coaching and get certified. You don't have to be, but to me, it was important to be certified. So I went through, got my certification that's recognized by the International Coaching Federation, has ethics and all that kind of stuff associated with it. And as part of that certification process, you talk about podcasts and your niche. And I said, okay, coming out late, folks, kind of fits with me. I kind of what I've been trying to do to help people to do that. So I built the podcast. Out of the sky dropped a person who's helping me as the producer editor that's very talented in that realm with their background and believes in what we're doing on the mission. And so we, as you know, because you're one of our guests, put together and share that information. And I can say it's very humbling and terrifying at the same time. I had at least one noted person that said, I'm alive because I found the podcast and you.
Oh, wow.
Because it
was life-saving for them. It was life-saving.
Which really ramps up the responsibility as the person putting out information to make sure you get the right people with the right information to help them. Again, the individual has to make the decision themselves. I can't do that for them, nor can anybody else. They have to do that with their partner, their environment, whomever they're working with in a relationship. Because most I work with are in a relationship of some sort, which is why they're kind of struggling more.
But if I only have someone listen that would save one life, it's 100% worth it for me. Is there anything you'd like to say more about your podcast?
I cannot help you with trauma of the past. I can't help you with PTSD. I can't help you with depression. But I can help you understand and find yourself at some level so you can move forward. And it's not all coming out either. I have clients that are maybe in a career change or other things in their life that they would just like to fine tune and work to a higher level. I like to say that coaching gets you from where you are to more of your excellence and more of your shine and to realize more of your potential. I mean, in my darkest day, I was literally in our walk-in closet in the fetal position in the dark, terrified, not knowing what I was going to do next. I was just frozen and stalled. And if you have that imagery of someone who is so depressed, lost, and confused, not wanting to live, when I was driving that 45 minutes, some days I thought, it'd be so nice if the truck just hit me on this bridge and took me over the edge and I'd be dead. I wouldn't have to deal with this. Luckily, I didn't have the courage to kill myself. That's where courage would be inappropriate because all it does is shift the problem to somebody else. It doesn't solve a thing. So if you're in threat, dial the national suicide hotline and ask for help, 988. And if you're a veteran, 9881. The takeaway is, though, look at me as an example and look at Dan as an example. There is happiness and joy on the other side of that deep, dark depression where you're totally lost.
Incredible
but
piece.
You have to do the work and own it. You have to own it. you have to be, I had a guest, Rick Clemens, we'll give him credit, said have to be unapologetically yourself. Can't apologize. You just have to be. And if you be,
Great comment.
then you're going to be in the do space, be, do, have. If you're going to be unapologetically yourself, then you'll know what you need to do, and then you'll have what you want, which is that joy. So you've got to work towards it, not say I've got to be joyful, but I've got to understand who I am and own it in an unapologetic way, to be authentic is the word I like to use, to be your authentic self, whatever that means to you, to move forward. And there is joy on the other side. So that's the takeaway, is that even though it seems horrible now and you don't see any way out, well, the family's going to collapse and my spouse is going to collapse. I'm not going to be a dad anymore. I'm going to lose the kids. But there's all kinds of stories that say that's absolutely not the case. There are ways to the other side of that where you can still be a functioning dad, a relationship with a former spouse at some level. Kids are still there, and the friends too. There's going to be some ups and downs, but you got to be patient, and things will come together as they need to be in a better way than they are today.
Even though you're scared, don't let the fear stop you being your authentic self. And that ties in so well with my platform, is don't let the fear stop you. Identify the fear and work it through as well. And I think that's such a powerful story as well. We're kind of like brothers on this. I've got to know David so well. And I'm just so appreciative that I have another mentor in my life, in David, that has been able to do the same thing that we're doing, even though we're very similar in our viewpoint of people and coming out late. I came out late in life. I think I told David, I don't think we recorded this. I said, I'm going to be a poster child, I'm not a child, for the latest one that came out, because I came out in 70. And then David says, well, he knows one that came out in 80. So I felt like that David just topped me on that one.
It wasn't me, though. So
No, I wasn't. Yeah. Thank you so much. You've been such a gift for me, and I appreciate you sharing your story, showing your courageousness. David, thanks so much. It's been such a pleasure having you on my podcast today.
Well, thank you for the opportunity. I really appreciate that.
Take care, my friend. Bye-bye.